guess we'll start with this. What was your reaction to the news yesterday?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I didn't think it was real when I first saw it. The first place I saw it was on the PGA Tour app, and they had breaking news on there, and that's not something I see too often on their app. And I was just shocked. I didn't really think it was real. And then I saw more and more people talking about it. I Googled it. I looked it up, and I'm like, holy cow, like, this is really the LIV and the PGA Tour coming together? Like, what's going on here? This is crazy.
David, have you been able to piece together yet what this thing might look like next season? Are they going to continue to run a LIV event and a PGA event? Would they run them at the same time? Are we going to continue to see the team events? How is this going to shake out? You have any idea yet?
I don't think anyone really knows, Dwight. I think it's going to be a crazy thing. I mean, I think that's the thing they have to figure out. Are they going to let the LIV guys back on the PGA Tour? What does the PGA Tour look like? I mean, where do you play these events? Obviously they're aligned with the DP World Tour, which is really a world tour where they play everywhere. So I think they've got a lot of logistical things they got to figure out. I think they wanted to make this announcement so they could make it on their terms versus getting it leaked out. But I just think the whole thing was handled very poorly by not telling the players at first. I think it was really interesting, the timing after Jack Nicklaus's tournament in Ohio there. I think he probably had to have known something about it because that's a really special week on the tour. Nicklaus is one of the all-time legends. I think it was curious, the timing of that. But I don't know, man. There's a lot of unknowns with this, and I think that's the good and the bad of it, I think.
We're talking with PGA David Coleman. All right, so in the end, why do you think Monahan made this move? Was it all about money?
I think money was a big part of it. I think the tours really, I think they're going down a road where they had to, dump so much money into these new designated events. And now you're going to start paying guys that didn't make the cut in certain tournaments. That was going to be an expense that they never had to incur before. So I think that was a big part of it. And then I just think overall, I think, these LIV guys really stepped up in the first two majors, and they didn't expect that. I think, Koepka played so well at the Masters and obviously winning the PGA. I think that was a surprise to them. And then I think there were a lot of rumors. Alan Shipnuck talked about it a lot yesterday, that, a lot of the players had been meeting with this Jimmy Dunn, who, is kind of the peacemaker in the whole thing between the PGA Tour and the LIV. And I think at the end of the day, the PGA Tour said, hey, we got to get these guys back. They're still a vital part of our sport. And it just was so odd that, you're only seeing these guys 4 times a year. And then reality was like, let's face it, like after the Masters, it was going to be like, we all kept saying this might be the last time we see a guy from the LIV, a certain player, play in the Masters. So I think it was really awkward. And I think, ultimately they were going to merge, but just the secrecy of the whole thing was really shocking.
This whole thing with Jimmy Dunn, a lot of people have never heard of him, Dave. What do you know about him? I think was he a member at Augusta? Was that it? Or how did he get involved as the go-between?
Oh, yeah, he's involved with a ton of different clubs, Dwight. He's a member at Augusta. He's a member at Pine Valley, Seminole, Shinnecock, Cypress. He's got some unbelievable courses that he's a member at. You'd love to be a guest at his anywhere, those courses. You'd love to get a tee time with him. But he's really connected very well with the tour. Especially, he's played in the Pebble Beach Pro-Am with a lot of these guys over the years. He's got friends on both sides, the PGA Tour and the LIV. And, being that he was so close to all these guys, I think they kind of looked at him as a guy, financially who's rough, and he's kind of in between, where he can talk to both sides and say, hey, like, we can rationalize this. I know that Brooks Koepka had met with him over the winter, from what I have heard, and Koepka was looking for a path back to the tour, and, he was the first guy that he went to, and I think they had a meeting at Seminole, which is right down the road from where Koepka lives in Jupiter, and a lot of the guys live in that area, Palm Beach Gardens and such. So I think he's just a big, with his job and his career and everything, he's so well connected to the game, and I think that's why the PGA Tour had him on their as an independent director, and they knew that he was the perfect man to broker this whole thing.
Hey, Dave, can you give us background on how a commissioner for the PGA is selected? We're trying to figure out how what the future holds for that scumbag Jay Monahan, and we're wondering how the decision process is made for a commissioner.
That's a good question, Chad. I mean, I know that Dean Beeman, the guy who, when I was growing up as a kid and I first got into golf, he was the first commissioner, and he was an ex-player. Tim Fincham was a lawyer, I want to say, who had worked like in the office there. I'm not really sure, honestly, how they elect somebody, but I feel like this could be just like a mutiny by the players. And I think the players could go as far as saying, hey, if Monahan's still around there, maybe we won't play, this tour. Because if you look at the power structure of this setup, Monahan is kind of like the guy, he's almost the czar of this whole thing, because he's in charge of not only what's going to be known as the PGA Tour, but he's overseeing what will be known as the DP Tour. And if there is a LIV, he's going to be in charge of that. I know he says it's not going to be, but you're hearing conflicting things about that. So I think it really I don't really know who the guy would be. It's got to be someone that I'll throw out a name that's kind of been out there. He's been known to have a good relationship with the tour. Jason Gore. Jason Gore, a former player, played at all golf. He's won on the PGA Tour. He had a good job with the USGA. I think he's involved with the PGA Tour. And I don't know. I think he has a really good relationship with Tiger back in the day. He had a good relationship with these younger players. When the USGA, there was some uncertainty with them and the tour players a few years ago. So, I mean, that's just me throwing his name out there. But I don't know. I think that's going to be a tough one. But I think Monahan, at the end of the day, is on borrowed time.
Dave, how would you feel if you were on the tour right now, a tour player, and something like this happened to you?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of player you are. I think that's the first thing you have to look at. I mean, are you a superstar player, Rory or a John Rahm or a Spieth or a Morikawa, a guy who's got a great resume? You've got multiple major championships on your resume, or are you a guy like who's Eric Cole, for example, who almost won this year at the Honda Classic and came in second and has grinded for years and years on mini tours and played all the Monday qualifiers, played the Corn Ferry Tour for a while. Who are you right now? That's the question. Who you are? Like, to me, the commentary, I think by Rory today was really good. But I think the stuff you heard coming out of that meeting up in Canada was really polarizing because he's speaking to a lot of guys. This is a really interesting week to have this because there's a ton of guys this week that are not fully exempt players on the tour playing in the Canadian Open because it's a little weaker field being the week before a major, the week after Jack's tournament. So if you're an unknown player, this is really kind of a scary time because let's face it, the Saudis control the game of professional golf now. They're bankrolling this whole thing. So if you don't fall in line morally with them, you might have to find a new line of work. So I think a lot of guys who maybe disagreed with them over time are going to have to say, hey, we love golf this much, we're going to play. I think for the top guys on tour, I think the rich are going to get richer. I will say this. I do think that, when the PGA Tour went to this top 70 thing like they were talking about this year with the FedEx Cup, I'd like to see that go away because I feel like 70 is too small of a number. I feel like you need more than that. But who knows, man? I mean, we're going into the wild, wild west, uncharted territory in golf, and this is a major, major unknown where things go.
Hey, Dave, what do you think the last couple of days have been like for Phil Mickelson?
I think he's celebrating this, honestly. I think Phil always knew, Chad, that he was never going to be as big in the game as Tiger or Nicklaus. He put on this phony act for years that he was the next Arnold Palmer, which we all knew he never was. I never bought into that crap. But, the thing is now he's got this on his resume. He will say that, hey, I was the guy that transformed all this. I was the guy that went out and changed things. And he's always kind of had this attitude. I've talked to people who have been connected to the tour, whether it's caddies, guys who maybe had a cup of coffee out there playing. guys have all said that Mickelson always thinks he's smarter than the next guy, and now he's really got that on his resume to prove everyone. But I think the thing that's going to be really interesting now with Mickelson is like this book that comes out, the Billy Walters, the gambler from Vegas, that Mickelson has a lot of connections to. They don't speak anymore. They don't get along. So there's obviously going to be a lot that's going to come out in that book over the summer. We're going to hear a lot of things that probably a lot of people in the golf business knew about Phil. But now the common man is going to know a lot more about Phil when the book comes out. And I guess he's going to spill the beans. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes. I mean, I think Mickelson's taking a victory lap right now. But I think at the end of the day, I think he is a very, very polarizing figure in the world of golf. And you know what? There's going to be, I think he's a lot like Brett Favre, honestly.
Wow. Okay. Speaking of polarizing figures, what about Greg Norman? What's going to become of him? Because we're not hearing much about him right now.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, Dwight, because I think the thing with Norman is Norman got what he wanted. Years ago, he was involved with like Fox and I think ultimately Fox Sports, where he wanted to get a world tour. He wanted to break away from the PGA Tour. And if you famously remember, they tried to do this at the old Shark Shootout tournament in Thousand Oaks near L.A., and Palmer and Nicklaus were in that meeting, and they walked out. I mean, they literally walked out, and the rest of the tour kind of walked out, and that's where the world tour kind of died. Norman sided with the Saudis. Obviously, we know the Saudis have so much money that the Saudis were able to bankroll this whole thing. But now that you're hearing conflicting things, I think Norman will do whatever it takes to keep his name in the headlines and people talking about him, because that's who Greg is. Greg is a very jealous individual. He obviously was always in the shadow of Jack Nicklaus down in the West Palm Beach area. And then when Tiger moved down there and Tiger, became a member at the Medalist where Greg started that club years ago in the 90s, he had never had a good relationship with Tiger. So I think at the end of the day, Greg Norman's going to do whatever he can do to feed his own ego. He doesn't play anymore, and he doesn't really design courses like he used to. So I think Norman's going to try to stay relevant whatever way he can. But I think the press conference yesterday, the initial press conference where Monahan was up there with the leader for the Saudis, they really didn't mention his name. So I think at the end of the day, maybe he's out. I think he's going to try to stay in as much as he can. But I think if Monahan and Jimmy Dunn and all these guys made this deal, I think there's a way. I think they funneled Norman out of the whole thing, in my opinion.
All right, Dave, we appreciate it, man. PGA Dave, David Coleman here on the Rip City Drive. Thank you for the insight. You got something else, Godfather?
No, I just want to say you really brought it today, Dave. You're on it. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man. And we do have a major championship next week. And who would have thought that Monday was a fun day with all the guys who got into the U.S. Open, guys who get a chance to live out their dream. And the next day we're talking about this stuff that is so polarizing. And I don't know what it's going to do long term, but I think in the short term it's going to draw a lot of eyeballs to golf for sure.
All right, we'll talk to you soon before the U.S. Open, buddy. Enjoy your day.
Thanks again, guys. Have a good night.